And we're live. Got the live button there. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the live stream. If you're watching this on the replay, you can fast forward about 10 minutes and we'll get started, or you can hang out with us here on the pre-show. I like to go live about 10 minutes before, make sure everything is working as expected, make sure I have these things up. Yep, that's working. What about this? Is that working? That's working. So I think we're in pretty good shape. I think we are in... I've already done some of the podcast recordings before we went live. If you are watching this over on YouTube and you're watching it live, there's a live chat that's not on YouTube. It's over on my website at professormesser.com/live. We've got a few extra things here. Today, by the way, is the 221,002 A+ study group. So if you're here for A+, you've come to the right place. Or if you just want to hang out for an hour and do Q&A, that's good. In the second hour, we'll open up the phone lines. You can call in, ask any questions you'd like. We can do a hurricane check since we're already getting that here this time of year. That's the way it works. It looks like YouTube is working, so I'm going to flip over to my presentation. What I really need to do is bring up my Skype, get that ready to go. That is now ready. Very good. What else? I think we're in pretty good shape. Recordings are going. We can see them there. Little Cylons there recording. Recordings are happening. This is my streaming server that's over in my data center, which is the room next to me. That streaming server is recording as well. So that's doing double duty. It's not only streaming, and it's not only sending out this information, streaming it, it's also recording that locally. So we've got plenty of recordings to go. And YouTube is recording this as well. Ultimately, I usually just use the YouTube recording. If there hasn't been any technical issues or reasons to edit, then this recording will be available on replay just a few minutes after I close it out. So it happens pretty quick. I think we're in pretty good shape. We've got about 7.5 minutes to go. I've done a quick check of cameras. Everything seems to be working. I like where that's going. We've got questions and presentation here. This is talking to that. That's all good. It's working. We just did one of these live streams 2 days ago. What could break in 2 days? Well, let me tell you. I can break some stuff in 2 days. It doesn't take much. All of this is a pretty well-oiled machine at this point. At this point, we've got audio is pretty solid. Video is here. So we sort of have audio, which is this panel here to my left. The video switcher is this panel that's more in front of me. And then everything on this side is what you see. So it's a combination of the slides that you see, me monitoring the chat room, you seeing the information for the questions. So it's all good. Got a few things to step through on here. So everything seems to be working the way I would expect. I think we can turn off that audio for now. I've got to put in to this some other configuration, some other audio and video inputs, but I haven't done that yet. That's next on my list of things to upgrade in here. Everything else seems to be looking okay. I'm not sure I'm happy with where my lights are, but we got to work on that. So a few folks are in the chat room. We've got Ohio and Indiana is here. Tampa, Florida checking in. Tampa, you got to be getting some of those bands at this point. We're getting a few of these bands here in the northern part of Florida. Certainly that's coming. I haven't looked at, let's look at the weather. There is or will be shortly a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. So that hurricane is putting out all kinds of water. Oh, yeah, Tampa, you're getting some water, aren't you? Those bands are extending way out there. And it looks like now it's is it a hurricane yet, or is it still it's still Tropical Storm Barry? But it will be a Category 1, they say. When it hits, looks like it's going to hit right in the middle of Louisiana. Could there just be a worse place to go right now than that? Hey, Maine. Detroit is here. Italy is here. Welcome. Siena. Very nice. We've got Both the East Coast and the West Coast are all checking in. Hello, Dallas. Is it bad luck to take the test on Friday? I don't think so. I think that's a good day to take it. I think by Friday, you've sort of studied up for the week. Friday's kind of a relaxing day. And if the test all goes well, you can celebrate by going out after. And if you do badly, you can commiserate by going out after. See, it's a win-win. Hello, Dallas, South Africa. Welcome. Good to have you here. Ireland. Here's Garland, Texas again. It looks like we might get a little water raining on us here during the live stream. We'll have to see. Have to see what happens. But the season has definitely started. So we've got hurricanes already popping up in the Gulf. This hurricane was weird because this hurricane started in Tennessee, came down to the Gulf, is building up, and then is going to go back up north. They say it could even go all the way up to New York State. Who knows where this is going to go at this point. Welcome, New Jersey. Cayman Islands. We were just yesterday, me and Mrs. Professor Messer, talking about the Cayman Islands. Literally. Talking about getting there and hanging out. Illinois. Welcome, Carl. Steven in the chat room passed your 1,002 today. Congratulations. Congratulations on your... Now, is that the second of the two, or did you start with the 1,002? Panama City, Panama, which is different than Panama City, Florida. So thank you for the clarification. Hello, Georgia. Georgia. Atlanta is also here. Puerto Rico, welcome. We've got... Oh, you are A+ certified. Congratulations. Congratulations on that. That's got to feel good. See, Friday's a good day to take your exam. There you go. It's all already been proven. Let's see how we're doing on time. Got 3 minutes left. We'll get things going in the live stream. I've got all the questions ready to go. I don't remember all the questions, but they are here and ready to go. Hello, Washington State. Washington. Thank you for being here. Congratulations on passing your 1001. I think everybody's kind of shifting over to those 1000 series at this point, aren't we? There's still a few people that are working on their 900 series, so they are going down to the wire. I can't do it. I don't know whether it's just time management is my problem or the stress of the time management. I'm not sure. It's one of those two things. It's not something I really like to do, is crunch it all down and have the time stand. Some people, it's motivating. They know that the 900 series will be gone on July 31st, and it works for them. So whatever works for you works for me. Yeah, they better hurry. They better get it going because July 31st is that. You're done. Besides my YouTube videos, do I suggest any good study apps for the 901, 902? I haven't found any that I really, really like. Now, to be fair, I've not really looked at a lot, but I am very, very picky about the type of questions I want to get. And there's probably 2 providers out there that have questions, or really 1 now. I don't know what, there's a few that have been consolidated, that got scooped up, that got purchased. And I need to go back and look at what other people are doing with questions and answers. Newcastle upon Tyne, welcome. Nigeria is here. We've got a few minutes before we get started. Do we have a few minutes? We have 1 minute. We have less than a minute before we get started, and we'll do all the Q&A. If you haven't popped open a new browser window, you'll want to do that. If you're watching live, go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can do the QA. You have a book for the 901, 902. Would the information contained within be reasonably up to date compared to the new exams? It would not. It would not. I'll explain here in the very, very beginning of the study group what has changed and what I recommend. So we'll go through and figure out those details. 20 seconds. Do I have everything? That looks good. That looks good. That looks okay. I think we can actually do this. I think we might be able to do a study group, everybody. Make yourself comfortable. Grab a cold beverage or a warm beverage, which is what I have. And then we'll get this thing started. Thank you for being here, everybody. Let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the July 2019 Professor Messer 220-1002 A-plus study group. We now have two A-plus study groups that we do during the month, the 1001, which we did 2 days ago, and this is all 1002 questions. So everything we're going to do for this first hour is I will be asking you questions that are specific to the topics contained in the CompTIA exam objectives for the 220-1002 exam. So there's plenty that we will be going through and looking at for the 1002 and really focusing on 1002 today. So in this first hour, we'll do all Q&A. In the second hour, I'll open up the phone lines and you can ask questions about anything. The 1001 exam, it can be about certification exams, it can be about anything, really. I don't know that I can answer anything, but I'll certainly take your question about anything. We do one of these once a month. We do a 220-1002 A-plus study group once a month. You can always go back and look at the replays on the Professor Messer website. Don't forget to sign up on YouTube to be able to get notified when we're going live. You can do that at professormesser.com/YouTube. We do a pop quiz question every day on Twitter at professormesser.com/Twitter. And don't forget about being able to also find us in other places. If you want to search on Instagram, for example, you can go to professormesser.com/Instagram. If you want to find us on Facebook, it's professormesser.com/Facebook. You just type in professormesser.com/ the name of the thing you'd like to find me on, and you will find me right there. We are also able to give you 1 hour of continuing education unit credit just for watching this. You don't have to have me send you anything, but some people like to get a digitally signed email from me that proves that you are here. So sometime during this first hour, I will give you a super secret special code of the month, and I will tell you exactly the process to use to be able to earn that email from me. And you of course, don't need that, but sometimes people who are collecting CEUs like to have it just in case you happen to be audited. And that way you've got some proof that you were indeed here. Today we're going to talk about A-plus exams. Now, as you're probably aware, there are two different flavors of exams you could be taking right now. There's the 900 series, which consists of the 220-901 and 220-902 exams. And there's the 1000 series, which is the 220-1001 and the 220-1002 exams. The 900 series exams have been around since December the 15th, 2015. Those exams will retire on July 31st, 2019. This is the last A-plus study group that we will do that has anything to mention, any type of conversations about the 900 series exams, because at the end of this month, in just a few days, we're now at the 11th of July, on the 31st of July, in a mere 20 days, those exams go away forever. So that is exactly what you need to know. If you're working towards your 220-901 or 220-902, and you really think you can finish these exams by July 31st, you need to get on it and make sure you're able to pass those exams. There are newer exams, however, available. These newer exams are the 1000 series. They were introduced on January the 15th, 2019, and generally those exams stick around for about 3.5 years. So that means if you have any concerns that you may not make that July 31st date, then I would highly recommend you focus on the 1000 series exams. That's exactly what you should be doing. Whether you take the 900 series or the 1000 series, the structure, the format, the grading scale, everything is exactly the same between them. You have to pass 2 exams. You can take them in any order that you would like. There are 90 minutes for each one of these exams. You could get a maximum of 90 questions per exam. You could get fewer, but they won't go over 90 questions. You have to get a 675 on the first exam on a scale between 100 and 900. And on the second exam, you need to get a 700 on that same scale between 100 and 900. Now, in the chat room in the pre-show, we were talking about having old materials for the 900 series. Can you use those if you want to take the 1000 series exams? My stance is that I highly recommend that you do not mix and match your study materials. I always recommend that you study from materials that match the version of the exam that you plan on taking. And here's one of the reasons why. I went back to the 900 series exam. I listed out every single topic in the objectives. I went to the 1000 series exams and listed out every single topic, and I looked to see what topics were new. Just over 20% of the 1000 series exams contain new information that was not previously in the 900 series. Now, that means that if you're studying for the 900 series exam, your score, if you went to take the exam, your score could be 20% less. If you want to extrapolate it that way, you're missing out on 20% of your points. And when you're taking a certification exam for the industry, 20% is a lot. That is huge. So you don't want to be in a position where you studied certain materials and then you walk into the exam and it's a completely different set of questions. And that will not only throw you, but you will lose points. So I highly recommend that you get 1000 series materials to study from if you are planning to take the 1000 series exam. So that's my advice to you. That's what I recommend that you do. We're going to talk about the 220-1002 exam. It's also called the Core 2 exam. So all the questions today will be around operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. We're going to go through those topics and anything relating to those topics. Of course, we have video replays of this study group available on my website. You can go back years and watch the study groups. We've been doing these 1000 series study groups since the February timeframe. So you can always do that. There's also audio versions of this in a replay that are in podcast form. So if you have a podcast listening program, you just add us to your list. And as soon as I upload this version of the audio, usually it's in the afternoon once I finish this study group, your podcasting program will automatically download it and have it available to you, which is nice. So it's something to think about. If you are watching the replay on YouTube, about a day after this is over, my marketing manager, Lori, goes through and listens to this entire study group. Hi, Lori. So she is going to go through and timestamp everything that we do. So if you want to jump around from one question to another, or you're looking for something specific on the replay, you simply go to the YouTube video description. You click on the time you want, and it will jump to that time in the video, which a lot of people tell me is extremely useful, and I hope that's something that you like, because poor Lori has to listen to me talk for this next hour and a half or so. So we are happy that some of you are able to use that. Her probably happier than I am, since she has to go through all that. So thank you, Lori. Today we're going to be doing Q&A. Here's the Q&A that we're going to do. Pop open a new browser window. Go to this URL, professormesser.com/QA. If you do that, it will open up right into a spot so you can see exactly the question that is waiting for you on the screen. That's right. I have a question that's already there and waiting. If you type this in and everything works properly, you will see that question. We'll look at that question in a moment. There's also an app that you can use for your mobile device. You can get that from your Google Play or the Apple App Store. And you can download the Socrative Student app. This is an app that will ask you for a room name. The room name is Professor Messer, PROFESSORMESSER. And if you type that in, you will also see the question that is waiting for you. The question that's there is actually a question from last month. Maybe some of you remember what we call our study group rewind question. We're going to rewind to last month and go through the question that asks, a user on the manufacturing floor is installing a Windows application for a new CNC. That is a computer numeric control machine. However, the installation program fails during the driver installation. Which of these would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would it be that the CNC machine is not compatible with Windows? Would it be that the user needs elevated permissions? Would it be that the Windows computer is not connected to the same network as the CNC machine? Is it that the CNC machine the CNC firmware needs to be upgraded? Or is it that the Windows workstation is infected with malware? So don't answer in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. You want to go through and go to your link at professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. And as you can see, these numbers are updating in real time as everybody locks in the answer so that you're able to see exactly what's going on that side. And you can see 56% of you have chosen that the user needs elevated permissions. And in fact, that's if you ever try to install a driver from an installation program, that's the first problem you're going to have. Is that if you're not running with elevated permissions, you're not running as administrator, you're not running that setup program to run as admin, then it's not going to install a driver for you. Windows is very good about that. It doesn't let someone with normal rights and permissions install a driver. And another interesting thing about Windows is that even if you are an administrator and you are a member of the administrator group, it still will not run this program with administrator rights unless you specifically tell Windows to do so. These are all security features. They're all built in, and it's very useful to know how to do this as well. So you can right mouse click the application and choose Run as Administrator, or you can type it in the search prompt. And here's a little shortcut for you. Use Control-Shift-Enter, and it will run the program as administrator without you having to touch the mouse, which is kind of nice to be able to have that speedy type of running as administrator. That is the right answer. We are in the case of needing to install a driver. The driver is going to need elevated permissions. You need to run that install program with elevated permissions. I've done this so many times. I used to have to run and install a program for, when I was an NSC for a firewall company, we had a utility that ran on Windows workstations, and it installed a driver. And if somebody tried to install it without running as administrator, it would not work, and they would call me and say, this is not working. And it was a very easy fix. I would just simply say, did you run it as administrator? And they go, oh, no, I didn't. I should have done that. And once you do that, everything works fine. So another nice tip, if you're ever troubleshooting a driver installation or just troubleshooting an installation of a program that just is not working right, try running it as an admin as long as you trust the program that's doing the installation. That's the caveat, of course. You don't want to give a particular application more rights than it should have. So make sure you trust the applications that you're installing on your Windows desktop. So hopefully you were able to answer that one. If you want more detail on the answer and the discussion we had, you can always go back to last month and see the discussion we had. Let's go forward, though. I have many other questions for you this month, so we can talk about 1002 questions. Now, one of the things that I do at the very beginning of the study group is I want to give you a similar experience you would get as if you were sitting down and taking the actual exam. As many of you know that have taken these exams before, they are not just multiple choice. You will certainly get a lot of questions that are multiple choice in your exam, where they ask you a question, and just like the one we just had, you can choose between A, B, C, D, or E. Now, one of the things that you'll notice on the CompTIA exams is there's a handful of questions at the beginning of the exam that are not multiple choice. CompTIA calls these performance-based questions. They are questions that are anything but multiple choice. They might be fill in the blank. They might be putting you at a command prompt and asking you to perform a function. You may have to do some matching on the screen. It might be a drag and drop. You never know exactly what you're going to get with the performance-based question. But it is all the same content that you've studied. So the way I like to think about it is it doesn't matter how they ask the question. If you know the content, you're going to do fine. One of the things I like to do on these study groups then is the first question I like to make a performance-based question. And this one happens to be a matching question. So I have 5 different data types and I have 5 different descriptions, and I want you to match these together. And it's a fill in the blank. So let me step through these so that people who are listening in will know exactly what I have here is the data types and what the different descriptions are. So here are the 5 data types we're going to be trying to determine. One is PHI, one is EULA, one is PCI DSS, one is FOSS, and one is PII. So those are our 5 data types. We want to call it that. This is a very broad description to call them data types, but I think it fits for what we're doing here. Now we have 5 descriptions. The 5 descriptions are: the source code includes comments and reference notes. The second is that the address and zip code is part of the database. The third is it's the results of a blood test. The fourth is all credit card information must be encrypted. And the last one is that the software can be copied for backup purposes. Those are the 5 descriptions. Now, if you think they are already matched together perfectly, then if you're answering this online, it's a fill in the blank. You can simply put 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D, and 5E, and you're done. That is not the answer, however. You want to go to ProfessorMaster.com/QA and put those in. And again, I'll remind you, please, no answers in the chat room, no hints in the chat room either. So let's go through these 5 different data types and descriptions again for those of you listening in. And you can try to piece these together. Our 5 data types are PHI, EULA, PCI DSS, FOSS, and PII. Those are your 5 data types. Now, the descriptions are: the source code includes comments and reference notes. The address and zip code is part of the database. It's the results of a blood test. All credit card information must be encrypted, and the software can be copied for backup purposes. Those are the 5 different data types and descriptions. So hopefully you can match these up. Now, this is a one-to-one. The exam doesn't always do this for you. Sometimes they will overload one side or the other, and you'll end up not using all of the descriptions or having to use the same description twice or 3 times in another answer. But this one is a one-to-one. So if you can match up 4 of them, then you've matched up 5, I guess, if you think of it that way. However, if you've only matched up 3, then you'll still be guessing. So I guess you can think of it that way as well. So you've got some different options. I can see a number of you are starting to put these in. Stop Googling the descriptions, though. People are thinking, what's the FOSS? What's a PII? What's a PHI? Don't Google it. You want to take a guess. You're sitting at the exam. You're faced now with this question that perhaps you don't know the answer to. And now you're going to need to figure out exactly what the answers might be. So this is one of the things you should do to be able to break this through and figure out these details. Hopefully you're familiar with at least one of these data types. You've probably heard at least 1 or maybe 2 of these before. The real challenge, though, is figuring it out. Notice on the exam also that this is not really a trivia question. I'm not asking you what the abbreviation means. I'm not even asking you what the definition of that data type is. I'm giving you some actual data types, and I'm having you match those up with the abbreviations that we have here. This is a very common thing that you'll find on the exam. The exam does not do a lot of trivia. It doesn't do a lot of what is the definition of this or what does this acronym mean. Really, it doesn't do any of that. It's not that it doesn't do a lot of it. It doesn't do any of it. That's one thing you will certainly run into. Let's see how we did with these 5 data types. Let's go through this answer and figure out these details. The first on our list was PHI. PHI. If you've ever worked through anything dealing with personal health information, then PHI will be the one that you need. And anything that deals with that personal health information from our list, there's one that really jumped out at you, and that would be the results of a blood test. That is certainly medical information. It's certainly something that should be your private healthcare information. So that's why whenever you look at the different options you had, we're going to match the PHI with C, results of a blood test. The second is a EULA. That's your end user license agreement. This is the agreement that says if you're going to use this application, here are the terms that the manufacturer, the developer of the application have created that says here's how you can use this app, and you're not allowed to use that application unless you agree to the end user license agreement. And the person that wrote the app gets to set the rules. So this EULA defines what those rules happen to be. If you go through and look at some of the rules in a very common end-user license agreement, one of the rules may say that you're able to make a backup of the software. You are legally able to copy the software if it is for backup purposes. Or it might even say that you can make 1 copy of the application for backup services, but they will put the terms of those particular license agreement terms in that EULA. So make sure you look through all of those terms and understand exactly what you're agreeing to. Nobody reads the EULA. Although you'll find when you get into larger organizations that are doing bulk purchases, that are purchasing software and it's costing $200,000, $500,000, over $1 million, these are very large software deals, you can bet the legal team is going to read through the EULA before they purchase that software. I've been asked for the EULA many times in those particular situations. The third on our list is the PCI DSS. Often you'll hear this referred to as the PCI, which stands for Payment Card Industry. The DSS is the data protection for the credit card info itself. These are all the data that's going over the network. So the PCI DSS is going to deal specifically with credit cards. All credit card information must be encrypted. That's what's telling us for the PCI DSS. And in fact, whenever you deal anything with the PCI DSS, most of the time you'll hear people refer to it as PCI. Are you PCI compliant? But the actual term is a PCI DSS compliant. But either term is completely usable, or either term is acceptable. And whenever you hear somebody say PCI compliant, you know exactly what they're talking about. They're talking about the data security associated with credit card information. There is another option on here. The fourth option here was FOSS, FOSS. That is the free and open source software. FOSS is going to be in the situation whenever you're looking at FOSS software, almost always the source code is available. So you're able to read through the source code itself, and you are able to compile it yourself or use a pre-compiled version, but still be able to reference back to the original source code. And very often in the source code, there are reference notes and other documentation that's within the source code. So you're able to read through the program and perhaps have a better understanding and perhaps a better trust of what the application is doing. And then you can compile that software yourself to know that you've compiled, you have an application that is as safe as the source code that you were able to read through. And the last option is PII. That is personally identifiable information. The only thing we have left on our list was answer B, the address and zip code as part of the database. Anything that would have your address, your zip code, your name, anything relating to you would be personally identifiable information, or PII. And that is the last one on our list. So quickly to summarize, PHI was the results of a blood test. EULA is software that can be copied for backup purposes. PCI DSS, all credit card information must be encrypted. FOSS is the source code, includes comments and reference notes. And PII has address and zip code as part of the database. Now, if you don't recognize any of these data types, you haven't seen these before, there is a section of the exam objectives, section 4.6 on the 220-1002, and I document this information in my video called Privacy, Licensing, and Policies. You can go to that video and see all of these different data types. That may help you as well on your 220-1002 exam. So how'd you do? How was your matching on your performance-based question? Hopefully you did pretty well with that one. Let's now shift gears. You're going to get a handful of performance-based questions on the actual exam, but today we get one. We're going to jump into a multiple choice question next. All you have to do is leave your screen exactly where it is, and I will put the new question up on your screen right now, because here is the question. The question asks, a user has tried to install a Linux distribution for dual boot with an existing Windows installation. When the system now boots, the only option is to start Linux. Which of the following would be the best way to restore boot access to Windows? So that's the one that's ripped from the headlines. This may have even happened to you before. Here are your options. What should you do? Should you run SFC from the recovery console? Should you reinstall Windows from the original installation media? Should you run bootrec from the recovery console? Should you modify the startup partition from the BIOS configuration, or should you uninstall the Linux operating system? Those are your 5 options. So this question again is that a user has tried to install a Linux distribution for dual boot with an existing Windows installation. When the system now boots, the only option is to start Linux. Which of the following would be the best way to restore boot access to Windows? Would it be run SFC from the recovery console, reinstall Windows from the original installation media, run bootrec from the recovery console, modify the startup partition from the BIOS configuration, or uninstall the Linux operating system? Those are your 5 options. If you think you know what the option is, go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA and lock in your response. We'll have to see how you've done. Now, I have done this. This is a question that I wrote because I did it. I have a Windows installation. I installed Linux on the same machine. The intention was to have dual boot, which is exactly what I wanted to do. I rebooted after installing Linux, and the only option I had for booting the system was into Linux. And I was faced with, how now do I restore boot access to Windows? Ideally, I would like to boot to both, but now all my Windows stuff is over there. We maybe can get at least booting back to Windows, and then we'll figure out what went wrong. Maybe that's how you should approach this. Who knows? But maybe this is something that can help you if you ever run into this issue as well. Or maybe it will help you if one of your end users has tried to install Linux on the same machine. Who knows what our end users are doing? Let's see how we did. I'm watching you lock in your answers right now. This one's not, you're not going to be able to Google this one very well, are you? At least not in the time frame that we have here, because these are 5 pretty good troubleshooting options that we have. Running SFC, reinstalling Windows, running bootrec, modify startup partitions from the BIOS, and then uninstalling Linux. Those are 5 pretty viable troubleshooting steps. But really, the question asks, which of the following would be the best way to restore boot access to Windows? Let's see how we did on this one. 60% of you say modify the startup partition from the BIOS configuration. We had 28% of you said run bootrec from the recovery console, and then it drops off a lot there. It's all single digits from that point. 7% said run SFC from the recovery console, and then a tie for 4th. 3% apiece said reinstall Windows from the original installation media, and another 3% said uninstall the Linux operating system. So it was either install Windows or uninstall Linux was the 3%ers down at the bottom. Well, this is a challenge, isn't it? Because now we've got a Linux configuration and we got Windows. It's all on the same machine. This could also be one where if you're working through trying to figure out what to do on these systems, another thing you could step through and try to think about is what's really going on when you work through this. Another situation you could run into is that you start the system and it's not able even to find any operating system. Forget finding Linux. Maybe it's not able to find anything. Our situation was that we installed Linux, and when we installed Linux, Linux overwrote the bootloader. And the bootloader is that it can be a menu that pops up whenever your system starts. For most of us, I think it's the bootloader. You only have one operating system on your computer, so it doesn't even stop and prompt you. It simply loads the operating system that's on your system. So one of the things whenever I step through and try to figure out what should we do with this, what is the next step with this, you've got a few things you can do. First thing you should probably do is check your boot drives. What if somebody had put some boot media into a drive and it was trying to boot from a USB drive, for example? Well, you need to unplug that USB drive so that it will get past that point whenever you're booting up your system. Another thing you can do with Windows anyway is to run startup repair, but if you're not able to start Windows, that may not be a very good option either. And of course, if you really want to troubleshoot and be very good at troubleshooting a machine that's running Windows, you want to become very, very familiar with the recovery console on that system. And one of the things you can do on the recovery console is modify the Windows boot configuration database, the BCD, or you can have it rebuild this information on this system by using the bootrec program to rebuild BCD, and then you can also use bootrec to reinstall the boot partitions on this computer. So this is where that bootrec becomes really, really useful to be able to do this. The bootrec, especially to update the boot sector information and to make sure your system recognizes that Windows is there, would be pretty useful. That way, after you run those 2 bootrec commands, you reboot your system and you can get back into Windows. Now, ultimately, you may want to modify that BCD, the boot configuration database, to be able to have an option to boot Linux as well. Optionally, if you're really a Linux guru, you could change the Linux boot front end, which is using Grub or some other type of bootloader, and you can change the configuration of that to boot Windows. So you have a few options available, but we only had 5 options available in our particular example that we had to choose from. These 5 options said which of the following, so we only had 5 to choose from, would be the best way to restore boot access to Windows. Now, the option now we know is option C, run bootrec from the recovery console. In fact, you'll probably be running bootrec with a number of different commands onto the end of it. 28% of you chose that one. That actually is the right answer, running bootrec. 61% of you, though, said modify the startup partition from the BIOS configuration. And one of the things you'll notice if you ever go into the BIOS config, you can change the startup drive inside of the BIOS to say, try booting from this drive first, try booting from USB second, try booting off the network third, and going that direction. But what the BIOS does not do is allow you to choose what partition on a drive to boot from. And the BIOS doesn't do that part. The BIOS simply hands it off to the drive, and whatever the configuration of that drive happens to be is what happens next. So the BIOS is not going to allow you to change what partition is being used. It's not even an option. So that is one where the 60% of you, unfortunately, did not choose the right one. That is not an option. The BIOS does not allow you to do that. So this is one maybe we learned something today. We actually figured out, oh, that's right. The BIOS doesn't choose the partition. It only points to a specific drive. So you want to, once you have this system set up, in fact, you may only have a single drive in this system. It may already be going to the right drive. In fact, we think it is because it's booting up the Linux. What we now need to do is change the configuration of the drive so that it boots the proper operating system. That's where that comes from. 6% said run SFC from the recovery console. That system file checker, the SFC, is very useful if you have certain system files that have been corrupted. Maybe malware has overwritten them, or you've had a problem with those files, and you want to have the system check all the core operating system files and make sure that they have the right versions installed. But that will not help you boot a different operating system. It's only good if you're trying to recover from some type of major issue with the integrity of the files of the operating system. It'd be pretty good to have that there. 2% of you said reinstall Windows from the original installation media. In that case, reinstalling Windows may actually solve this problem because it's going to overwrite the entire boot process, including the bootloader. But of course, we probably have information on our Windows machine, and maybe installing Windows not only is time consuming, we got to find the Windows media and do this, but you'll also find that this Windows is now, you could be overwriting information, and that may not be what you want to do either. Not the best option. Uninstalling Linux may indeed uninstall the Linux operating system, but it may not uninstall the bootloader. In fact, that's very common that it would not. So that is one where you absolutely need to go through and understand exactly what each one of these things is going to do, and then choose the way you would like to go from there. This is one where if you're familiar at all with Windows and Linux, it's probably going to be a combination of different things that you might want to change, and you have a lot of options available. And of course, on your exam, you only have 5 options available. So make sure that you choose from the options available to you. One of the things you'll find on your exam, in fact, is the options available may not be the first thing that you would do, but you only have these 4 or 5 options available. You have to choose the one that is the best option given the scenario that you've been presented with. So if you answered C, run bootrec from the recovery console, and bootrec that would allow you to overwrite that boot area of the drive, that's what you'd like to be able to do. Is run all. Make sure you're familiar with all the bootrec commands that you will need to run. It's an important part of the troubleshooting part of the 220-1002 exam. So it's going to be pretty useful to have that functionality there. Let's do another multiple choice question. I've got one here that we can go through. Our next multiple choice question asks, a user in the European Union would like to remove all of their personal information from a website. Which regulation provides protection of this data? Would it be FOSS, PCI DSS, HIPAA, GDPR, or PII? 5 different options available. Some of these look familiar to me, so they may look familiar to you as well. So our question is, a user in the EU would like to remove all of their personal information from a website. Which regulation provides protection of this data? Is it FOSS, PCI DSS, HIPAA, GDPR, or PII? Do you think you know the answer? You want to go to professormester.com/QA. Be able to answer that particular question. Please, no hints in the chat room, no answers in the chat room. Hopefully it's one you were able to to figure out and get through. Whenever I start looking at all the different options on when I'm trying to break down what these things happen to be, some of these things look familiar. Some of these answers that we went through, you may recognize from previous questions. This will happen on your exam as well. Take advantage of this. It's one of the reasons that I tell people skip over a question, maybe skip over the performance-based questions at the beginning, go through all the multiple choice questions and kind of gather in all of these details with this. So hopefully that may be something that can help you as well. It's not a bad strategy. Some people just like to pour through and get through the performance-based questions quickly. Some people prefer jumping over them and coming back later. The exam itself allows you to jump to any question at any time, which is not the situation for every industry exam out there. For example, the Cisco exams, once you answer a question, you can't go back. You can only go forward. So CompTIA exams aren't like that. CompTIA exams allow you to jump around to any question at any time, at least in the time being. They haven't changed that for any of these. Hopefully, that's one that you can run into. Let's see how we did with this one. We'll click the How Do We Do button. 49% of us, 50% say it's GDPR. 39% say PII. So only 7% said HIPAA. Only 4% said PCI DSS, and 0% said FOSS. So is this another situation where the majority may not have the actual answer, or are we finally spot on with what the answer might be? Well, if you've ever dealt with any of the regulations coming out of the European Union these days, you know the regulation dealing with someone's personal data is going to be the General Data Protection Regulation. This is from the EU, especially in the EU. So this allows users to have a little more control over their personal data. They can send the person running a website a request to say, please remove my personal data from your website. And in the European Union, anyway, that website is mandated to remove that from their website, at least for the most part, remove that from the website. There's certain limitations to that and certain things that cannot be erased or removed from certain websites, but at least you have the option with a number of these websites to do this. This also controls how the data could be exported as well. So if the data is in the European Union, you could have this data stay in the European Union or not leave the EU. So you got a little more control over that as well. Some people refer to this as a right to be forgotten. That's not entirely true. The regulations themselves are, of course, many and varied as it is associated with the GDPR. I get a lot of GDPR requests to my site, and I'm not in the EU. So technically, can I ignore them or not? Well, we're not sure yet. In the United States, anyway, we don't have to follow European Union regulations, but there are agreements between countries and country entities that state that certain regulations may have to be followed. It's a weird gray area that nobody's really tried yet. So we're really not sure exactly where these things are going to go. And if you're like me and you've purchased products from a company and your information, there's credit card information, there's your personal information, there's your shipping information. Some of this information can't be removed because of tax reasons. So there's all these little nooks and crannies associated with GDPR, but you have to know about GDPR and how it might affect the data that you're working with. In many places, especially companies these days, you're not in a single country. You're in many, many different countries, and you may have to handle the data differently depending on where the data is living, where the data happens to be. So the regulation, this question asks specifically, which regulation provides protection of this data? Indeed, it is the GDPR. That is the specific regulation in the EU that handles that. Now, 38% of you chose PII. PII is a description of the data itself. It's personally identifiable information. The PII is protected with the GDPR regulation. So it's a little bit of context associated with that. So hopefully you're able to break those differences down if you happen to see them. Your PII is the data itself. The GDPR is the regulation that protects the PII. So that's another one you can think about. So if you did answer D, GDPR, D was the right answer. 51% of you got those absolutely right. There is a huge amount of information on this exam. We've already seen today, there's all these data types, there's networking, there's security, there's operating systems, there's hardware. There's a mix of so many different things that are on this exam. What I've done, of course, is create a video training course that covers every topic from the CompTIA exam objectives. I checked them off as I went down the list. So I'm completely sure I'm covering 100% of what CompTIA says you need to know for this exam. But if you've gone through all of my videos, which of course you can watch every single one of my videos, every minute of every video is available for you to watch for free online, you know that there's a lot of data here. We're talking about over 130 videos for the A+ series, and it's a huge amount of data, hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of information. So what I've done is take all of the data, all of the text, all of the graphics, all of the details for every single one of my videos, and I put them into a single document. These are my course notes. This is a PDF file that you can purchase and download, and it is for the 1002 exam, over 50 pages of information that you can pull from. So you can see everything is broken out by the video itself. You can see, for instance, video 1.2, an overview of Windows 10, for example, is everything that was in that video. And if there are charts and information associated with those videos, you'll see those listed here as well. So that's one where if you're trying to just have a summary of everything, have a complete overview of everything that happens to be in there, that's one of the ways that you could do it. Hopefully that's something you might want to consider. I not only have the PDF version, I have a physical version as well. That's the physical book. It's the same information. There's nothing new or different in here. It has exactly the same details, exactly the same notes. It's full color. It's nice, heavy bound. You've got a nice, perfect bound paperback binding. It's a nice, high-quality book. And if you get the physical version, I'll give you the digital version for free. So I'll have to ship this one to you, but in the meantime, you can download the PDF and look through that as well. You can find out more about that on my websites at professormesser.com/1000notes. And that's another way that you can help support the site as well, because many of you are aware I don't accept any donations to my site. I want you to get something for your money. So the exam notes are something that might help you as well. They don't replace the videos. They don't replace your book. They don't replace Q&A or hands-on, but they give you everything in one summarized view. So you find out more information at professormesser.com/1000notes. And thank you so much for your support and your purchase of those course notes. I've got more questions for you. Let's go through another multiple choice question. This one is asking, a system administrator is documenting the BIOS version running on all of their Windows servers. Which of these utilities can be used to provide this information? Is it System Information, Event Viewer, Component Manager, MSTSC, or Registry Editor? Those are your 5 options to choose from. Is it System Information, Event Viewer, Component Manager, MSTSC, or Registry Editor? If you think you know what that answer is, you can go over to professormesser.com/QA and lock in that answer as well. System administrators documenting the BIOS version running on all the Windows servers. Which of these utilities can be used to provide this information? There's one best answer for this one. Lock that answer in, and you'll be able to figure out those details. Be able to break these down and figure it out. This is one where not always an easy piece of information to find either, is it? Maybe that's the tricky part of this one, is knowing first. That's a difficult. I can see it. Let's reboot the system, and I can get the BIOS version. But we can't do that on every single one of our servers. Those servers have to stay up and running. So we'll keep the servers up and running, but I still need to know the BIOS version. Have it figure out those details. Be useful to know that, wouldn't it? That's one of those that you try breaking out, finding the details of this information. You'll be tasked by your manager. Here, please get this very weird piece of information from me. Go. and we'll figure out the details of what that happens to be. Lock in your answers. You go to professormaster.com/QA. You can get those answers locked in and figuring out those details. Maybe you've been in this situation before. You need to find BIOS information. So maybe that would help you out figuring out what that happens to be. If you're ever in a situation like we used to have back in the turn of the century, if you want to call it that, when we went from 1999 to the year 2000, we were doing a lot of checking of versions. So, of course, this could happen for security reasons. It can happen because application software might want a particular type of BIOS version running on that system. There's many different reasons to get the BIOS version. So it's useful to know how to do this inside of the Windows operating system without having to reboot your computer to be able to see that. Especially if that machine, what that server is remotely at a different site. You don't want to start rebooting machines that are at a remote site. That could be bad news. Let's see what we think the right answer would be. I'm going to click the How Do We Do button. 68% of us say it's system information. 20%, though, say MSTSC. 6% said component manager, and then a tie for last place. 4% said event viewer, and 4% said registry editor. So which one does it happen to be? What would we use to be able to view the BIOS version that's running on that system? And the one I would use, and the right answer in this case, is MS-Info32. MS-Info32 is formerly known as Windows System Information. But if you've ever been at the command line and hit the MS-Info32 and hit enter, that is going to pop open another window on your system that will show you lots of details about exactly what you're running. It'll tell you versions of software. What is the operating system version you're running? What is the system name you're running? And as you can see here, it even tells you information about the BIOS. For example, you can see BIOS version details are listed in the MS-Info32, the system information, to have those there. This will give you details and breaks it down in different categories. The 4 categories are the memory, the DMA, the IRQs, the conflicts for hardware resources, components, software environment, and you're able to get a system summary from that as well. A lot of detail in MS-Info32. You often go to it a lot whenever you want to find information because it really does a good job of consolidating all of the information running on your system. So if you're ever trying to figure out how much memory is in this device, what version of the operating system am I running, what version of the BIOS is running, what type version of a driver is installed, instead of going to a lot of different places inside of Windows, you go to system information and you can pull that up as well. And I suspect a number of you have done this before because indeed that is 67% of you say the system information is correct, and you would be right. It was the answer A, system information. That is what it's going to give you. And if you don't recognize system information, just remember that MS-Info32 is the same thing as system information. You may not realize that. You may be so used to typing in MS-Info32 that you forget that it actually has a name associated with it, which is system information. Now, why is it not MSTSC? Well, for those of you familiar with remote desktop, this is the Microsoft Terminal Services Controller, MSTSC. This is the remote desktop front end. The program MSTSC allows you to use remote desktop and connect to a desktop that is located somewhere else on your network and be able to view and control what is on that remote computer. Well, that doesn't actually tell you anything about the BIOS version running on that computer. Just running MSTSC can allow you to remote desktop to a computer, at which point you would probably want to run MS-Info32. So it's the MSTSC. All it's really doing for you is setting up the remote screen. It doesn't tell you anything about the BIOS. That would not be the right answer. 6% of you said component manager. Component manager, although it sounds like it handles the hardware components of your computer, it does not. Has nothing to do with the hardware components or the BIOS of your computer. So that would not be the right answer either. 4% of you said event viewer and 4% said registry editor. Event viewer, there might be some information hidden somewhere inside some event when this system boots up that might give you BIOS details, but I suspect that's even sketchy that would be the case. That is not a good place to go to find BIOS information, assuming that it's in there at all. It will tell you events that are occurring on your computer, but it's not going to give you BIOS details. And of course, the last one is registry editor. The BIOS of your system is not something you can find in your registry. You can find a lot of information about how Windows is configured and how your applications are configured, but you're not going to find BIOS details in the registry editor. The best answer here is indeed A, system information. It's on the front page of MS Info 32. That is the right answer to use, and that's the one that you may want to look at if you're trying to find those details on your computer. If you are watching this for continuing education credit, you want that 1 hour of a webinar credit. You can, of course, just document that you were here for this webinar, but you can also send me a note, and then I will send you a digitally signed email that says that you must have watched this, but you must follow these instructions exactly. You want to go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link at the top or the bottom of the site. Click that Contact Us. It'll pop open a form. You want to put your name, your email address in there, and there's a subject line. Helps me a lot if you're able in that subject line to put that this is the July 2019 220-1002 A+ study group, and you want to put the super secret code word of the month, which is system information. I think that's a pretty good one to use since that was the right answer in this case. System information. That way I know you must have watched this because you know the instructions on how to do this and you're able to send that message. Now, you can put whatever you'd like into the body of that message. I read through every single one of these. I unfortunately am not able to respond to every single one of these, but I do read everything that you send to me. I read all of my Facebook comments. I read everything that's tweeted to me. I read everything you put on Instagram. There's a lot, so I'm not able to get back with every single one of those, but I do like to reply on a lot of them. So it's something that at least we can keep that conversation going, and you're more than welcome to ask me whatever you'd like from that view as well. From the top or the bottom of the website, the Contact Us link, you can use anytime you want. So it doesn't have to be just for a study group. You can send me a message at any point. So hopefully it's one you can use whenever you're using that. Let's do another question. I got one. Another multiple choice question coming in, I believe. Yes, it is. And the question asks, here it is. Let me flip it on your side as well. A home user has accidentally formatted a drive containing important documents. What type of drive formatting would allow for the recovery of information? What type of drive formatting would allow for the recovery, you can't see it here, of information? You can see it here. So here's the question. The possible answers are a regular format, an NTFS format, a safe format, a low-level format, or a quick format. Those are your 5 different options for those. So a home user has accidentally formatted a drive containing important documents. What type of drive formatting would allow for the recovery of information? Is it regular format, NTFS format, safe format, low-level format, or a quick format? Those are your 5 different options. If you think you know the answer, lock in those answers. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can lock in this. Hopefully, you've not been in this situation. I have been in this situation before. It was actually on a video camera. So there's a flash in the video camera. I took some video. I think we were at Disney. It was a vacation. We have the video camera. I'm taking pictures and video with the video camera. And then my son, this was many, many years ago. He was very, very young. He might have been 2 or 3. We're in the hotel room. He picks up the camera and somehow hitting the buttons on the camera uses the format function on the camera and formatted this drive. So you've now had a family vacation with video and photos that are irreplaceable. And now what do you do? So this is the situation you're in. Now you have to hope that the format that was done on here is something recoverable. I wonder what kind of format it was. So let's see if you know the answer to this one. Yeah, that one hit pretty close to home. Let's see how we did with this one. Then I'll tell you the rest of the story after we're done with this. So how did we do? Well, 53% of you said it's a quick format. That's what you should use. 21% said a safe format. 18% said an NTFS format. We have 4% that said regular format and 4% also that said low-level format. How are we having these ties for last place in every single one of these, it seems? That's the situation we're in today. So if we go with the majority, you can see that most of you have said, well, it's clearly the 53% of you say it's the quick format. Should we go with that as our answer? Well, formatting a disk, especially with Windows, is one that can be a bit of a challenge. Let's step through the different options you might have available when formatting the disk. Whenever you get the drive, you've purchased the drive and it's shipped to you, it has what's called a low-level format that's already on that drive. It doesn't have the format we think about when we think about storing something as a FAT32 file structure or an NTFS file system or one of the many other file systems. This is one that is even lower than those file systems. It's put on at the factory, and it's intended to be put on the factory to prep it for other operating systems to put their own file systems on top of that drive. Generally speaking, a low-level format is not something you, the end user, will ever do. I don't think I've ever done a low-level format on a drive. It's not intended for me to be able to do that. The other type of format you'll see in Windows calls a standard format. They also call this a quick format, which means that it kind of clears a section of the drive as an index, but that's it. It doesn't go into any other part of the drive. It doesn't go to every sector of the drive to check it out. It simply effectively creates a table of contents on the drive, and it just assumes that every other page on the drive is blank and ready to go. And it's hoping that nobody actually has written anything on those particular pages. It's just kind of taking the table of contents and saying, okay, there's nothing in the table of contents now. The drive must be empty. The other type of format you'll have is a standard format. Sometimes Windows will call this a regular format. It not only erases the table of contents, it goes to every single sector on the drive, and it begins erasing, overriding every part of the drive with zeros. This is a function that was available in Windows Vista and later. And if you use a standard format or a regular format, it has already erased every sector on the drive. You're not recovering from that, ever. You're not getting data back in that situation. The only way to get data back is if somebody did what's called a quick format whenever they do that standard format at the beginning of Windows installation. The quick format is the one that would allow you to recover that information. And in fact, a lot of you know this already. The quick format was option E. 55% of you chose quick format. That is the right answer. Now you'll notice that safe format is not really a thing. There's not a term, safe format. People were saying, I don't recognize some of these formats. Yep, I made them up. So that's one that is sort of a standard. Regular format is what Windows calls the one that does the overwriting of data. So it definitely would not be the regular format. NTFS format, I guess that is not really a term. NTFS is a file system. The way you would put that file system on a computer would be either with a quick format or a regular format, if that makes any sense. And then you have a low-level format. As we've already mentioned, low-level is not something that we would be taking either. For the low-level format that's done by the manufacturer before you ever get the disk. The answer indeed is quick format, option E. 55% of you got that one right. So the rest of the story. So my son hits the erase the format button on this camera, and everything is now gone. Nothing. So I immediately power the camera off. I take out the flash. It is one of these SD cards. So I take the SD card. I had my laptop with me. I plug it into my laptop, and I run an unerase program. I think I ran Recover. For those of you familiar with that, I'm not abbreviating that. It is Recover with an A at the end, so that it's a little more palatable. You don't want to have that hard R. Well, I've found that's negative. Nobody wants the hard R. It's Recover. So that is what I ran. Recover, because this was formatted with effectively a quick format, and it was formatted with a file allocation table 32 format. It was able to very easily see all of the files. All it really effectively does is erases the first character of the file name. And if you've ever looked at the file names on these, they all start with the same character. So all I did was to press and tell it to put this character at the beginning, and it filled all of those files in again. It effectively rebuilt the table of contents, and I plugged it back into my camera, and we got all of our pictures and all of our videos back. So that, my son, we went from being, it was a very dark moment, and it went back to being a very happy moment by having all his videos. One of those where, you know, we're at the animal kingdom. We've been selected. We go up to the front. I've got video of the owl that's coming over my head. It's one of those situations you're just not going to get that back. So that was the end of that story, and it all turned out very good. That's a very good example, though, of if you use the right format, you can easily get this data back. If you handle the data properly and it's formatted a particular way, getting the data back can be very trivial. But you have to make sure that all of those things are in place. Let's do another. Yes, it was an owl. It was at the animal kingdom. There were flights of wonder, whatever they call it. It was the bird show. As I'm a dad, well, we saw the bird show, and that's what we did there. We got time. We're in overtime. We're going to do another question anyway. Last question of the day. I know we're at the top of the hour. We're doing another one because I talk too much. This question asks. Let me click my button on this side. A user in the accounting department has noticed that their workstation appears to be working much slower than usual, and some of the files in their documents folder now show the file size as 0 bytes. Which of the following would be the most likely cause of these issues? Would it be A, the computer's motherboard is failing? Would it be B, the browser's pop-up filter is disabled? Is it C, the computer is infected with malware? Is it D, the browser is visiting sites with invalid certificates? Or is it E, the accounting software is not configured with the proper permissions? So that's our situation we have to troubleshoot. A user in the accounting department has noticed that their workstation appears to be working much slower than usual, and some of the files in their documents folder now show the file size as 0 bytes. Which of the following would be the most likely cause of these issues? Would it be A, the computer's motherboard is failing? Would it be B, the browser's pop-up filter is disabled? Would it be C, the computer is infected with malware? Would it be D, the browser is visiting sites with invalid certificates? Or would it be E, the accounting software is not configured with the proper permissions? That's where we need to figure it out. One of those 5. Hopefully, you're familiar with those 5 things and what it might be. If you think you know the answer, go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA, and you can figure out those details. We want to be able to parse this one out. There's a huge section of the 220-1002 exam that does require you to do quite a bit of troubleshooting. And you have to do troubleshooting from all the things you just learned in operating systems, security. You have all of these different topics that you've now gone through. How do you figure out how to fix problems dealing with those situations? And this is one that you could certainly run into when you're trying to troubleshoot problems. This user in the accounting department. Some of you, I think, may know what is happening with this user in the accounting department. Lock in your answers. You go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA, lock in that answer. We'll see what you think it was, and we'll get a summary breakdown of what these happened to be. Let's see how we did with this one. I'm going to click the How Do We Do button, and 70% say the computer is infected with malware. That's a pretty strong answer. 17% say that the accounting software is not configured with the proper permissions. 9% said the computer's motherboard is failing. 1% said the browser is visiting sites with invalid certificates, and nobody says that the browser's pop-up filter is disabled. So is it the 73% of us that said, that sounds like malware? That does sound like malware. Malware could do anything on the computer that you, the user, can do. It can rename files. It can move files. It can delete files. It can delete the information in a file. It can encrypt files. It can do anything on your system. Has complete control. Anything that you can do as a user, malware can do as well. So anytime you're seeing a message where you don't have permission to get to certain files, or the access to the files is no longer there, probably malware related. Now, in this case, how do we know that that was really the most likely cause of this issue? Because that is one of those questions you get on the exam. Which of the following would be the most likely cause of these issues? Let's go through each one and see if this really is the most likely situation. We're getting a slowdown of the computer, and we're getting files with 0 bytes. So malware is what we're going with. If you answered C, the computer infected with malware, that is the right answer. Now, E, 16% of you said the accounting software is not configured with the proper permissions. And if we were on the system, maybe the slowdown could be related to that. But we have this symptom where files that are in the documents folder now show the file size as 0 bytes. Now, if you've ever seen your file sizes go to 0 bytes, you know that's an issue. You know that's an enormous problem. Your file sizes should not be 0, especially if this was a spreadsheet you always use, and now it's 0, that's a problem. So this would not be a case where we didn't have permission. In fact, we had not only had permission to the file, whatever got into that file deleted everything. So it's not in fact, you would have hoped you didn't have permission to the file. That way the malware would not have access to the file. But in this particular case, that's not the situation. The accounting software, it has exactly the right permissions that it needs. But in this case, your accounting software probably is not the thing that's changing and deleting all of your data. You would probably find that your accounting software would not be one that was very long for this world for anybody's network. Accounting software generally doesn't go around slowing down systems and changing all of your file sizes to 0 bytes. So that would probably not be our most likely cause of this issue, considering that C is available as the computer is infected with malware. We're still going with C as the one that would be the most likely. 9% of you said the computer's motherboard is failing. And if the motherboard fails, you probably get a blue screen of death. You probably get a stop error message on your screen. It's not going to start deleting data from your hard drive. Bad motherboard would cause your system to stop working and perhaps even to slow it down. But whenever your documents folder is now showing file sizes as 0 bytes, probably not related to your motherboard. Certainly not the most likely cause given the options that are here. I'm still going with malware as being the most likely reason. 1% of you said that the browser is visiting sites with invalid certificates. And if you've ever done that, you'll know you'll get a pop-up in your browser that says, you're visiting a site that I can't trust because this certificate is invalid. It's either been signed by some certificate authority we don't recognize. Perhaps the date is expired on the certificate, but we don't trust it. If that occurs, you'll certainly see that message in your browser. It's not going to slow down your system, and it's not going to delete data that's in your documents folder. So that's definitely not going to be the most likely cause of this issue. And indeed, only 1% of you thought it was anyway. And 0% of you said the browser's pop-up filters disabled. Pop-up filters can be useful. Disabling them can also be useful at times, but it's not going to slow down your system, and it's not going to delete data that's in any of your documents in the documents folder. The most likely cause, given the options available, are the one that really fits the best, and 74% of you think that as well, is that C, the computer is infected with malware. That is the right answer, and hopefully you were able to see that as well. Well, we do one of these study groups every month, and we've got 2 more next month. Stop back by in August. On August the 13th is our 221,001 study group, and August the 15th is our 221,002 study group. We'll do all these. And of course, you can go back and look at all of the replays on my website, either in a video or audio form. The links are right on the main page. If you're watching this video and it's after August the 13th and August the 15th, you can always find out when the next live event is going to be by going to professormesser.com/calendar. For example, next week on Wednesday is our Network Plus study group, where we do what we did today, but it's all for Network Plus. So there's plenty that you can go through. And the replays of these study groups, the video is available on YouTube minutes after we're done at the end. You can always stop back by and watch those videos. And I usually have the replay links up and running by the end of the day so that you can always come by and find it on the website very, very easily by using those links on the main page. We've got more to go through today. This is just the first hour. I'm going to open up the phone lines. We'll take questions and your phone calls. We also will take questions from the chat room from professormesser.com/live. Been watching all the messages go by. I'll be glad to take questions from there as well. Don't forget about following us on Twitter for the daily pop quiz question at professormesser.com/Twitter. Of course, our YouTube site, professormesser.com/YouTube. We appreciate you subscribing there as well. Don't forget about the course notes, which might help you for your studies. You can find that at professormesser.com/1000notes. Check in on the calendar if you want to know when the next live event is going to be. Stick around for the next hour. We got plenty of things to go through. We'd love to have you here, stopping back in and asking more questions, either about A+ or anything else you'd like to ask about. We appreciate you being here for this first hour. We will see you next time on the A+ Study Group. Now it's time for me to get the phone lines up and running. So I am going to call into my own show. That's kind of how it works. So if you will bear with me a moment, I'm going to make sure that my show is up and running. I'm going to host a show. I'm going to start the show. This is what I do on my side. This is because I don't have a producer. It's just me in the room. And then I'm going to call into my own show, and we're going to make sure this works the way we would expect. Then we're going to push some buttons on the screen and see if this works.
Enter your 6-digit PIN number.
I will do that. And if I do that properly, it will say,
Welcome.
welcome. Well, thank you. Thank you for welcoming me. And that means you are welcome as well to either call in or ask questions in the chat room. The chat room can be found at professormesser.com/live. And you can also call in. The phone line is a toll-free number in the continental U.S. at 855-785-RJ45. That's 855-785-7545. You can also call free from anywhere in the world using Skype. No Skype minutes are required. I pick up the bill. You put a +1 at the beginning, so the phone number would be +1 855-785-7545, and that will connect you here as well, and we can pick up the phone lines and talk about that. This was a busy week for a lot of the topics we talked about today. The GDPR, was it British Airways that got a big fine for the GDPR this week? That was a big one. And it's kind of remarkable that it happened. We're waiting for the first big one to hit because it's a relatively new requirement. And they had the fine is a maximum of 4% of its worldwide turnover. And so the fine is about 1.5% of its 2017 revenue. What was the total amount? The fine would be 183 million pounds is what the ICO, which is what do they call the Information Commissioner's Office for the EU, is fining them 183 million pounds. So we talked a little bit today about GDPR and the fact that a lot of us in the U.S. are aware of it. We did change a lot of our security and privacy policies and data policies in there so that it would be mostly compliant with the GDPR, but we still aren't quite sure if we're really liable to follow those particular regulations because there is a little bit of this international law issue associated with this. So as we've seen today or this past week, there are some big companies that could be fined some big money to do this. Are they going to pay that money? I don't know. They have 28 days to appeal the ruling before it's made final. And then what do they do with the 183 million pounds? They can't make your data more private. It's already gone. Whatever the breach was associated with this, the data is already missing. So do we take 183 million pounds away from the company so they can be less secure? Because I would use that 183 million pounds to buy some new firewalls and buy some new data protection gear and software and processes. No, we'll take the money away and then you'll not have that money to be able to spend I guess. I don't know. That one doesn't seem very logical to me. But in any case, I guess there has to be some type of penalty, or people will not spend the money on the firewalls. Is this the wolf's head on a pike on the fence post to kind of let all the other wolves know they shouldn't be doing this? Well, we'll find out. That's really the case. Whenever you get into data privacy and those types of things, I run into problems with having people understand the nuances of that, mostly because it's hard enough. If you're looking from the outside at this, imagine trying to figure out, if you're a U.S. company, but you have customers that are in the EU and they ask you to remove their data. Can you? In some cases I can. In some cases I can't. I have the Internal Revenue Service here in the United States that requires I keep my information a certain amount of time for tax reasons. So there's all these interesting, not loopholes, but stipulations, I guess it would be, whenever you're trying to break those things out. So we'll see where this goes. The whole idea of making your personal data more secure is one I think everybody likes. How we're able to do that, is regulations going to work or is it not? Well, we'll have to see about that one too. We're just not sure. It'll be interesting now that British Airways is the one that was kind of hit first with the big fine. They're not the first one, but they're the first really, really massive one, certainly the largest so far, that maybe it's something that everybody else will take a little bit of attention to and wonder if they should be doing something else to keep the data private. Let's go to the phone lines. We've got the 360 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yeah, my name's Travis, and I am calling from Bellingham, Washington.
Welcome, Travis. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
I am curious, with the new 1000 series tests, what information was dropped to make room for the 20-something% of new information?
That's not a bad question. I talk a lot about the things that are new on the exam. I talk about how 20% of the content on the newest exam is not on the 900. But of course, it's almost as important if you're shifting gears from the 900 to the 1000. What did change? Now, what I tell people all the time is all this information is publicly available. It's part of the CompTIA exam objectives. You can do what I did, which was put them next to each other. And although they are in a different order, you can draw lines between them to see what is different and what isn't. But I'll give you kind of the high level difference from the 1001, 1002. On the 1002, one of the biggest differences is really the operating systems that are covered. On the 900 series, you have to know Windows Vista, Windows 7, and Windows 8/8.1. 8.1 and 8 are effectively the same thing. So you've got those two that you have to, those three operating systems in the 900 series that you have to know about. On the 1000 series, the things you have to know about, there's no more Vista, so that really does help. There's effectively, you have to know Windows 8 and Windows 10. There is some Windows 7 on there as well. So the operating systems got shifted over a little bit. I'm going to pull up the 1002 exam objectives so we can kind of see the differences between those and what we're working through. I'll put these on my screen here so that you folks can see what I see. There it is. So here are my 220-1002 exam objectives. Mine are color-coded so that you can see the things that are new and they're not new. Your question was different than these color codes are, which is what is now no longer in these versions. And you can see on here the Microsoft Windows versions is Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 8.1. Those were the two big differences. And so Windows Vista is gone from here. And those are probably the most significant amount of things that are missing from the older series is that. In the rest of this, which are Microsoft operating system features and tools, control panel utilities, other operating systems like Linux and like Mac OS, a lot of and security, a lot of these things are exactly the same as the 900 series. They didn't change very much because things like a zero-day attack is still the same thing. So a lot of the attacks and things that you ran into on the 900 series or in the 1000, they just added to it. You can see there's some yellow on my screen, which means they added to those things. But a lot of those other topics on the 900 series are exactly the same. There's not much difference. They changed a little bit with the troubleshooting section at the end under software troubleshooting. Practically everything was the same, but they added more operating system problems in the 1000, but they kept a lot of the problems that were in the 900 series. So I would say more was dropped from the 1001 that on the 901 topics were dropped from the 1001, then the 1002 topics were dropped from the 902. I say that right? Hopefully you can figure out where I'm going with that. But I think there was not as much drop from the 1002 than there was with the 1001. It's now just at least you don't have to worry about Microsoft Vista anymore, thankfully.
Yeah, I assumed as much. I just didn't know if there was going to be anything else major that had been dropped. So that answers my question. Thank you.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. That's one of the things I need to probably do on my side is I've talked about things that are new, and it would be good to break out, maybe show some more of that information as we have it on our side and being able to work through that. But one of the things I run into, especially with trying to break down where the difference is, we need to know not only what's new, but what we no longer have to worry about knowing. On the 1002, don't worry about Vista, and everything else is pretty much the same with some additional added pieces. That's one thing I did find very similar across all of these is that there wasn't as much removed as what was added. They sort of just added to the list of things. On the 1001, there were some significant things changed. For example, if you go through the 901 exam, one of the things people always had to remember that was very trivial, was trivia type stuff, is knowing all of those different, very specific CPU socket types. You had to know all these Intel socket types and all of these AMD socket types. And even at the 900 series, we were trying to figure out, why do we have to know that? That's not something we really deal with day to day. You have to deal with it if you're building your own computer, but you never have to deal with that if you're not. You already have a computer. It already has a CPU, and it's in a socket, and you probably would never see the socket. It's not like the socket ever comes up when we're troubleshooting. I wonder what kind of socket we have. That's not the issue. So in the 1000 series, they're just not there anymore. In the 1001, the 220 1001, no longer do you have any sockets listed. They also simplified a lot of the things associated with the hardware of the computer. So you no longer have to worry so much, at least what they put into the list, is you don't have to worry about memory timings, which of course you really didn't have to worry about either. You just needed to worry about, does it work or not? How do I know I have the right memory? Where do I put these things in my computer? So that's what I worry about too whenever I'm looking through those, is having those pieces there. I noticed that the online chat had a little bit of a hiccup. So if you are in the chat, you may want to refresh so it has a chance to reconnect to the server and be able to ask any questions you have that. And so, yeah, I probably do need to create, as you're mentioning in the chat room, a little cheat sheet that would break down for people the differences. Probably not going to be as big a problem until now. Now that the 900 series is going away, and if you've been studying for the 900 series, it goes away on July 31st. If you're studying for that, it helps to know the differences. If you decide, I'm not going to make it, let's now shift gears. And you have to think, is there anything I don't have to know anymore? So yes, things like the CPU sockets, you don't have to know anymore. I always tell people, stick to the exam objectives. Someone was mentioning in the chat room the other day, I had to memorize all of the socket names, and then there was this ton of processors that were compatible with the sockets that I had to memorize. And I had to make the point of the exam objectives only had the sockets. It didn't say anything about processors. There were no specific processors listed at all in the exam objectives. This happens a lot when people are doing the networking section, and they'll show me a page of 100 different port numbers, and they say, I'm halfway through memorizing these 100 port numbers. I say, yeah, but the exam objectives only list about 20. So that's the difference. CompTIA stays very close to the exam objectives. They are, as you've already seen, those are very specific. They give you exactly what you need to know. Other people that are doing certifications don't do this. Cisco doesn't do this. Microsoft doesn't do this. VMware doesn't do this. Amazon doesn't do this. Nobody else does this. CompTIA gives you a very detailed step-by-step breakdown of everything you need to know. And if you stick to the exam objectives, you don't deviate, you stay exactly on that path, and you know everything that's listed in those exam objectives, you're going to do fine on the exam. The exams do not deviate very far, if at all, from a lot of these exam objectives. And even if they do deviate a little bit, the bulk of the exam comes directly from the exam objectives. You're going to do fine, as long as you know everything that's in the objectives. That's the hard part, of course. I say it like that's the easy part. You just know everything that's in the objectives and you'll do fine. Well, that's the hard part, is knowing everything in the objectives. So that is the challenge. So the question, chat room, is the 901 or 902 even available? It certainly is. As we mentioned, those 2 certification exams will retire on July 31st. So you can still take those exams, and people will still be taking those exams up until July 31st. I can tell you this based on just experiences in the past. The first A+ series I did was the 600 series. So I've done 600, 700, 800, 900. This is my 5th iteration of the certification exam for A+. Every single time, people took that exam version up until the very last day. I don't recommend that. I don't think that's, I couldn't do that. Other people, as I mentioned, though, they're very motivated by that. So it works for them. So if it works for you, do that. See, folks in the chat room like, I'm taking my 902 a week from today. So that's it. They're going to get that 902. They'll be done, and they're just as A+ certified as somebody who passes their 10,001 and 10,002, or 1001, 1002, and being able to do that, to have those. I don't do well in those situations, so that's the scenario with me. Now, if you are taking your exam a week from today, my last minute advice is pretty much what I just said. You have been given a step-by-step breakdown of everything you need to know for the exam. Get the exam objectives and use them as your final checklist. You will be able to go through each one of the topics in this, and you should be able to explain to somebody else. If we look at the very beginning of this, in fact, let's do that. Let's bring it up on my screen. Put me in here. There I am. We're going to bring this over. So here are the exam objectives. I'm going to go right to the first one. Spin this over here. The first one is operating systems. Compare and contrast common operating system types and their purposes. The first one is 32-bit versus 64-bit, the RAM limitations, and the software compatibility. You should be able to explain to somebody what that means. If you can explain to somebody, let me tell you the difference between 32-bit and 64-bit. There's 2 big differences. One is the type of software you can run between them, and let me explain to you what the difference is in that software. And the other one is the RAM limitations, and let me explain to you what those RAM limitations are. If you know that, check it off, go to the next thing. So now you've got workstation operating systems, Microsoft Windows, Apple Macintosh OS, and Linux. What are those common operating system types? And very broadly, compare and contrast those operating system types and their purposes. If you can do that, check those off your list. The next one is cell phone/tablet operating systems. This is another one that changed, by the way, on the 900 series. No more Windows Phone operating system. Some of you are asking, what is Windows Phone? Well, indeed, that is exactly the right response. Microsoft Windows operating systems, Android and iOS. Windows not there anymore on the 1001 series, though. But obviously, tablet does apply there. So that's really what they're talking about. Microsoft Windows running on a tablet, which is, of course, very popular to have that there. Chrome OS is listed in that as well. So you should be able to explain. So that's the process you should be going through, is explaining that to someone else and having that process work for you that way. So make sure. Can you complete the 900 series in Spanish if you're not ready after July? In fact, July is the end date for the English language version of the 900 series. The non-English language of the 900 series, if I have a look at the website, let's see if they detail when that date is going to be. I know last time I looked it was later. It wasn't now. It was after the fact. The exam details now show other languages on their website. Officially on the website, they say the other languages are TBD. Now, I heard that the other languages were later in the fall, but having it as the time is going to be determined. So we don't know yet, at least from the information on the CompTIA website, when the 900 series will be retired for other languages other than English. We don't know yet. Keep checking back on the website, and you'll know exactly when that will be. But you do still have some extra time, so that's good. So if you're still working on the 900 series and you're doing this in a language other than English, you have more time after July to be able to do that. So there is some advantages to having that and all of those pieces there. Oh, very funny that people in the chat, you got to be careful about this as well. In the chat room, people are going, they should drop Windows 7 from the 1000 series, except it's everywhere. It is everywhere. I was literally in a hospital recently. The entire hospital system that all of the nurses and doctors were using, Windows 7. Windows 7 Enterprise is what they were running. So I'm walking down the hallway. Did I take a picture of it? I took a picture of it. I'm walking down the hallway, and it has right there on the screen, log in, Windows 7 Enterprise. And that's what they're running. So you better know Windows 7 because you're going to be doing a lot of migrations from Windows 7 into probably Windows 10. That's the real key, is to have that there. Is to know that. That's why they tell you about Windows 7. That's why people look at the A+ exam and say, it's not all new stuff. Look, they're telling us these old things. Well, yes, because people are still using these old things. And you go into a job and your first big job will thank you for being here. We're so glad we hired you. Your first project will be migrating Windows 7 to Windows 10. Hey, figure out how to do that. Let us know what you're going to do and how long that's going to take. Thanks. Well, if you knew nothing about Windows 7, you would certainly be at a disadvantage. So that's the concept, the idea behind that, is being able to do that. Have that knowledge in your head. Pretty important to have that. There is a question in the chat room. Where can we find the color-coded objectives that were on the screen a few moments ago? Well, I'm glad you asked. You do what I did, which was I went to the CompTIA website. I downloaded the objectives. I put them up side by side with the older version, and then I wrote in the colors. So that's the first thing I did before I started making these videos. People, you want to know the first step? I grabbed the exam objectives. I looked at the old ones, and I saw what had changed. That helped me understand what did I need to update in my videos. So I went through and updated everything. Every slide, every bit of information was gone through. I re-recorded every bit of information. I was able to really update a lot of things I wanted to from the older version too. So even though the content hadn't changed, you'll find that some of the slides and some of the presentation I do is different as well, to have those there. So pretty nice to have that. So that's where those color-coded objectives came from. I made them. So I highly recommend you do that too. And then as I have another copy of that, you didn't see that as I was shooting the video, there was another color coding I was using to effectively cross off what I had done. So as I was building out the presentations, sometimes the presentation will grab a little bit of this section, a little bit of this column, and a little bit of that column in the same section number. And so I was able to kind of paint them out, put them into that presentation, and then I know what I'd covered already. So I do a lot of note-taking digitally, and that's what I use, is a lot of colors to be able to do that when I'm working through the courses. It helps me at least keep everything straight when I'm doing the objectives. Yeah, so I have not shared that document somewhere. As far as I know, I don't think I have the rights to share it. I think that's a CompTIA copyrighted piece of information, and I don't think I'm licensed to be able to share that. Now, I could take the content of that because it's more of a factual content, sort of like the sports scores. Sports scores are not copyrightable. That's something that you can take the sports score and you can put it out and tell everybody what the score was. Anything that is a factual sheet of information, a specifications type sheet of information, that is not really copyrightable. And I think a lot of the content that CompTIA put into that document, being that it's the breakdown of the objectives, probably the list itself is not copyrightable, but the format that CompTIA put it in is. So that's the slippery, weird slope of copyright. It's constant oddness, but that's one where I can't share their document. I could write my own document, color code it, and give it to you. Because in my mind, that breakdown of what you need to know is more of a fact sheet. So that's one of those things you run into with understanding exactly what those things are. The format is the copyrightable piece. I wouldn't really call it intellectual property. Technically, I guess it is, but that's the piece that is copyrightable from CompTIA's perspective. Having that there. And you're right in the chat room. Windows 7 is basically a polished version of Vista. It is Vista. Not a polished version of Vista. Windows 7 and Windows Vista are the same thing. There's no difference in those two. They changed the name so that people wouldn't hate on it anymore. And suddenly they thought Windows 7 was great. I will never understand that. By the time Windows Vista got all the bugs out, because when Windows Vista came out, it was buggy. And people were absolutely right to say Windows Vista was buggy. By the time Windows 7 came out, what they did was they took a pencil and they erased the word Vista and they wrote 7 and they re-released it. I know that wasn't factually what they did, but effectively that's what they did. There were minor differences in the features of those operating systems. But because it was a new name, really Microsoft pretty smart to change the name. Everybody thought 7 was fantastic. What a great operating system. And everybody else had been running Vista for a while. Like, that's the same. We're already running that. They go, no, you're running Vista. What you have is awful. This thing on 7, though, this is fantastic. It's all about perception. And don't ever think Microsoft isn't capable of doing some marketing. That was brilliant. They did a fine job with that one. Well, the vouchers for the 900 series exams work for the 1000 series exams. I have no idea. That's really up to the terms and conditions on the voucher, I would imagine. And I have no idea what type of vouchers CompTIA puts out. I'm not a CompTIA partner, so I don't sell vouchers. I don't have access to vouchers. I don't deal with vouchers. I don't want to deal with vouchers. So I have no idea what the terms and conditions are of those vouchers, and figure out what those are. If they say they expire in October, then obviously they will work on the 1000 series, won't they? Just makes sense. But the terms and conditions should be on the vouchers themselves, so you can figure out those details and having all of those there. I don't deal a lot with those. There are people that I've worked with at CompTIA. There are people I know that work there, but I don't talk to those folks very often. I'm not involved in the things that they do because I'm not a CompTIA partner. So my best recommendation would be to call CompTIA directly and confirm that with them and make sure that's the case. I would hate to have a voucher there and then tell you something wrong, and then you're saying that, well, Professor Messer said these vouchers should work. What do I know? I have no idea. So find out from somebody much more familiar with those, and they'll be able to help you out, because I'll just end up messing up your whole life. Don't trust me on that one. Nobody wants that one. Am I still associated with GTS Learning? GTS Learning was purchased by CompTIA over a year ago, almost a year and a half ago. So they're at that point, they were no longer an organization. So the folks at GTS Learning, I think, were effectively enveloped by CompTIA. So no, I didn't work with them anymore because I'm not a CompTIA partner. So I don't really, they aren't a company anymore. And the people that I worked with there now that are at CompTIA, I don't work with them either. So no, I guess not. I guess that would be no. That was a good group, though, to work with back in the day. Every once in a while in your business career, in your career in general, you'll have certain partners or certain people you will work with throughout your career. Like, that was great working with those people, and that was great working with the folks at GTS Learning. But as a company, GTS Learning no longer exists. So that was the end of that. All good things, as they say, must come to an end. And that was one of those. But CompTIA did keep their content, and I guess they still have people working at CompTIA that are from the GTS Learning. So there you go. Rock on. Have those capabilities. I don't even know are they still doing the video QR codes? I don't know. I mean, they certainly could. All of my videos are still on YouTube. Anybody watching the videos on YouTube, it is the YouTube terms of service that apply to that. Technically, I don't have a way to allow or not allow somebody access to those videos, because once I put them on YouTube, it's YouTube's terms of service that apply there. So maybe so. I like their labs as well. Folks in the chat room saying they had really good labs. They sure did. Up until they were acquired, we were talking about doing some videos of their labs. So take their labs and do a video version of stepping through the lab. What we couldn't figure out was, how do we do that? Because that would obviously be a bit time consuming, but how do we do that and make the content available to people in a way that would justify the time and effort to make the videos themselves? You know, if I could put them on YouTube for free, which is my model, I would do that. But these are labs you would have to purchase, and me describing and stepping through the lab would effectively remove the need for someone to purchase the lab book. So couldn't do it without messing up the whole thing. That's the challenge, isn't it? Just finding the right business model to make all of those things happen, and everybody can get those pieces. But that is another thing we were looking at, because I like their labs too. And step through them. So they have those capabilities there. We are digging deep in the questions. If you would like to ask a question, you can go to the chat room, professormesser.com/live, because the important questions of the day are being asked there, such as the one that asks, what made you decide to grow a beard? Which is, I think that's the one top three questions I get, really. No, nobody asked that. I think it's just laziness. I think, yeah, we're going to go with that. It's not, I don't think that's exactly the case. But it was something, but whenever I started doing this full time, because there was about 10 years of Professor Messer as a company where I had a full-time job. I worked during the day, did a lot of traveling, and then at night and on the weekends, I would do this. So whenever I went to do this full time, whenever I finally was able to make the jump and say, I think I can do this full time and we can still keep a roof over our heads, I think that's the point where I decided I can just stop shaving. That's kind of what happened. We're going to go with that. The real answer, Mrs. Professor Messer likes the beard. That's the actual answer. So there you go. I don't have any current plans to do any duo study groups, having more than one person on the study group. No, I don't really have any partnerships with anyone else. I don't really talk with other people that are doing similar things to what I'm doing in the industry. I sit in a room and I write books and I make videos. And that's kind of my focus. I try not to go outside. I try not to spend a lot of time doing other things. It would just complicate things anyway to get more than one person in here. And try to do a study group. So no plans at the moment to do more than one person in a study group. That would be, I'm not sure how we do it anyway. Have those things there. I used to do a podcast with Mrs. Professor Messer, and we would have there was a nice conversation, but that was more of a podcast format. In this one, we're really focused on getting through as many questions as possible, but still be able to kind of explain things and summarize and dig deep into why something was right and why something was wrong. That's the focus here. And I think having more than one person there would probably limit my ability. That's kind of me thinking off the cuff. I haven't really considered it before, probably because that's what I think, is that it wouldn't work. So another question in chat room, a common question, will I be adding to my training catalog Cloud Plus, Linux Plus, Server Plus, i.e. anything, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't have any current plans to add another series necessarily. There are other products and projects going on, but I'm not completely saying there won't be another course, because I've got a big list of things I would like to do, and that list does include a number of different topics. Let's do a little bit of inside baseball so I can kind of bring you into my mindset of what I think about this. There's an interesting balancing act for my particular business model where I want to make as much information available as I can, but I need to make sure there are people that are watching that material, because that ultimately is what keeps all of this going. So I have to think about what type of topics, certifications, or technologies would someone be interested in watching. And watching, I think, ideally in this format where it's a training course, where somebody at the end of the course, there's a potential to get a certification. I personally like that format. At one point, we were toying with the idea of doing just maybe generalized videos. Hey, here's new Apple phone of the day. Apple just released the new iPhone XXXL. And we go through and look at the differences and what's new. But at the end of that, I didn't feel like that was as valuable to my core mission as other things. And my core mission has effectively turned into, how can I get people a job or get them a better job? So is that certification courses? Is it informational videos? Is it doing labs? Whatever it happens to be. But that is the core. And you're right. There's plenty of other channels out there talking about the latest product of the moment. And I like to watch those. I think those are great videos. I enjoy watching those, and I'm more than happy to add to their viewers. But mine is more of a long form project, isn't it? It's not just one video and it's about A+ and I'm done. It's a series. It's 138 videos, and it's across months of time to create this. So it's a very, very involved and a very long curve to get you. And at the end of that, there is potential. Somebody has more knowledge that they can then use to get that certification, which in my mind, whether you want to have the conversation about whether certifications are valid or not, that can help somebody get a job. It can help them get a better job. Is it the only thing? No, of course not. But this is the little thing that I can at least put in their list of things that they can use to help them get that job or get that better job. So that's my perspective of that. So that's why I've stuck with this format. So the real question is, what do I do next with the format? Is it going to be another course? Should I focus more on creating more types of content for the existing courses that can help people in more ways? It's probably going to be a combination of things. And those. So I don't know that I have the right answer for you. I can tell you currently, until the end of this calendar year, I don't have any plans for Cloud Plus, Linux Plus, or Server Plus. Linux Plus is probably higher in the list than others, just because it's a relatively new certification. They just came out with a newer version. I say just, but in the last number of months, came out with a newer version of the Linux Plus from CompTIA. So that one's more attractive to me. But that's a big course, though. That's an enormous course. Am I spreading myself too thin? Should I be creating more content for the core courses I have? Those are just normal business decisions that me and the Mrs. Professor Messer talk back and forth about and figure out the details and work through those. So we're never quite solid on any one thing. We work on a particular project. We get at the end of that project, we take a step back and say, so what are we going to do now? And we recently did this. We just finished the A+ course. We just finished the 1001 and the 1002. Both of those courses, the creation of those courses is done. Every video is online. Everything is available. The closed captions are being created right now, which is not something I do. That's a third party. So I'm watching the closed caption files come in my email. I have to kind of add those to the videos I already have. We're updating the flash drive graphics so that people who want to buy the offline version will have a flash drive format they can get. But those things are relatively simple. Now we took the step back and said, okay, we finished A+. Now what do you do? I mean, it's a good question to go through. It's a good problem to have. What do we do next? And we decided on a project, and I'm currently working on that project. I think it's going to be a good project, but I can't share it with you yet. It's not A+ related, but it could be one of the other courses. Eventually, actually, it will be A+ related. So nothing's in a silo in my world. If I do it for one course, I'm going to do it for everything. So I'm working on something right now that I think people will like. It's something that people have been asking for. So we'll see how that turns out. I will know more for you in a month or so. I don't have anything to announce right now, but it's coming along swimmingly, and I'm really, really liking it. I showed Mrs. Professor Messer a mock-up of some of the things we've done that we're going to be producing for this new product that I actually haven't had this type of product before. So she liked it. So she likes it. I'm good. Everything's good there. She's the one to have those there. I watch a lot of unboxing videos. Linus Tech Tips are good. It's all in I'm bad with names. I'll have to pull them up in my YouTube subscriptions to tell you all the ones I watch. Because what I do is during the day, I work. I tell people I work half days, like from 8 to 8. And then after that, I like to sit in front of my TV and just watch YouTube videos, just kind of veg out a little bit. And so I have a big list of subscriptions that I go through to pull those out. Do I have all of them in here? I may not have them there's a mini and varied group of my subscriptions. And some of them are definitely related to unboxing videos. Some of them are networking videos. It's just a mix of different ones to have here. I should probably look around and see if I can find that. The one I watched recently, I've been watching a lot of networking and updated videos. Somebody was mentioning this in the chat room, is that there's a lot going on now with certifications. So Cisco just updated all their certs. Microsoft's been constantly changing their certifications around. Microsoft has kind of gotten things back together. They've kind of taken a focus that is moving more away from operating systems. So we'll have to see what they really stick with on their certification side. I think I understand what they're trying to do from a corporate perspective, but this is sort of the problem these big companies run into. Cisco did this. Microsoft is doing this. There was a time during it was probably about 10 years ago, just over 10 years ago, we were having that massive problem with mortgages. That was the worldwide issue that really started in the U.S., but had that mortgage breakdown and the whole economy dived. And Cisco made some decisions and said, we're going to focus on these 4 areas. None of those 4 areas was security. So they corporately decided we need to kind of bring the ranks in. Let's do what we know we can do during these very tight years. And they made a business decision not to focus, or they told people, and in fact was the case, they weren't going to focus on security, and they didn't. And at that point, interestingly enough, I was working for another security company, and we just took off. It blew up. It just was one of the most amazing stories of the growth of a company I'd ever seen. And I was there to live through that, but we couldn't believe it when Cisco came out and said, here's what we're doing as a company, and none of it was security. And suddenly the people that had Cisco's security products were like, what? Wait, what? Oh, what are you doing? And they stopped working on security. For about 10 years, they stopped working on security. Not quite that long, about that long. They still haven't quite caught up yet. That put them so far behind. Those are the things companies do, though, where they make that one minor switch and it has a long-term effect on what they're able to do. Microsoft's done a similar thing with their certifications. They have gone back to the terms people know and having the MCSE, the MCSA. They're starting to use some of those older terms But you'll notice that the focus is no longer on operating systems is the core. It's now a very broad set of higher level that is no core. It's sort of broadened out across. So we'll have to see if that makes sense for what they're doing. I don't know that Microsoft has figured it out either, but they've shown at least more flexibility, I think, than others have with their certifications. They've been more willing to shift things around. And for Microsoft, I don't think the issue for them is, are we making money on certifications? I don't think they want to make money on certifications. I think they want the certifications to support the products they already have. I don't think that's a bad deal, really. I think it's pretty smart. Is it something that the industry will latch on to is the problem? This goes back to, is it something that can get you a job or get you a better job? That means the people hiring have to know that technology or that certification exists. So this is what problem with Microsoft had. They got rid of the MCSE back in the day. This was years ago. They got rid of MCSE and they changed all the formats around. But the people hiring didn't even know MCSE wasn't there anymore. And they were still asking for MCSEs. And people coming in on the interview had said, well, Microsoft doesn't have an MCSE. They have a similar thing, and this is what it is. It was just confusing. So they've now changed that. But now that they broadened it out into these different categorizations of MCSE, are the people hiring going to be aware of that? So this is the problem that CompTIA has. This is the problem that Cisco has. This is a problem that everybody who does certification has. They're going to have new certifications. They might have different names. How long is it going to take to get those names in the heads of the hiring managers? That's been the biggest problem, I think, with CompTIA's security certifications. Not that their security certifications are in some way substandard or are not providing you with security knowledge, because they are good certifications from the content perspective, but the hiring managers never heard of them. We're only just now, years after they have been created, starting to see more traction from the hiring managers with CompTIA security certifications. It's just one of those weird things with the certification industry that there's no good answer for. How do you make a hiring manager more familiar with something that they weren't familiar with before? And how do they categorize it in their mind? And is it better or worse than one of these other security certifications? That's really an ongoing problem. The CompTIA needs to market to the hiring managers perhaps more than they market to people who need the certifications. It's almost like one requires it of the other, almost like it works down the other direction. You can tell I've thought about this for a little bit, haven't you? This is one of those things and then it gets to me. What do I do next? Well, what has happened with people looking for certs? What are they asking for? Why are they asking for certain certs? Why are they not asking for others? What are hiring managers looking for? I feel like sometimes I spend as much time on the sites on the monster.coms and dice.coms of the world to try to see what people are asking for. I spend almost as much time as people looking for a job are on those sites. And I'm not looking for a job. I want to know what they're looking for so that I can get at least an idea of that. But even then, I don't know that I'm getting the most accurate information. And it's coming directly from the people who are hiring. It's a weird world we live in. It's a world I live in. Maybe it's not your world that's weird. It's just my world that's weird. And I'm perfectly fine with that. That's just how it goes in this. So that's a little inside baseball for you. I know that's sort of a long answer for that question of what am I doing next? There's no good answer. Sorry about that. That's just the way it works. But at least you can kind of get an idea of where I am in my head as we're going through these things. And who knows, tomorrow it could all be different. One of the benefits of being your own boss is you get to make the decisions, whether they're right or wrong, and you can change it at any time. And the only person who really is benefits or does not benefit from that is the one making the decision. So that's kind of nice in being able to have those. So I think that's the idea, is to have the focus from that perspective. Well, I appreciate you being here. We've come to the end of our second hour. My voice has made it. But now, like anything else, as we mentioned before, all good things, right? Let's hope this is one of those situations where this is one of those good things. I want to thank you for being here. We wouldn't be able to do these live streams without your participation. We'd love to have you stop in next week. Next Wednesday, we're doing our Network Plus study group where we'll do more live Q&A. I'll open up the phone lines and take questions from the chat room after that as well. And of course, you can ask about anything you would like from there. Still, nobody's asked me about any Xbox stuff, which is another thing I spend too much time on as well. Maybe we'll get to that one in the next study group, figure out all those pieces. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here for the study groups. We look forward to you being back for the next one as well. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the A+ Study Group.